Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Loss Elimination is Your Organization Living in Sin. Before we get started, just a couple of reminders for you guys. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please use the chat window in the bottom right corner of your screen to type in your questions. Be sure to select all participants in the drop-down so everyone can see what your question is. If you have any technical difficulty or questions during the webinar, you can use the chat function and send your request directly to the Lifecycle Institute. That way we can address your question there. During the webinar, you may be asked to use your annotation tools to type in answers or examples for certain slides. You can do this by using the text tool that's located at the top of your screen. It looks like the letter T, and that'll open that up so you can type in there on that slide. And without further ado, your speaker today is Josh Rothenberg. He is a reliability subject matter expert with Lifecycle Engineering. And without further delay, I will turn it over to Josh.
Thank you, Sherry, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us in today's webinar. Loss Elimination is Your Organization Living in Sin. First off, we want to start off with how do we define sin in an organizational context? And that can be loss or unrealized potential earnings. And anytime we don't realize our potential in terms of our machinery and equipment, our hidden factories, that is in fact a sin. What are some examples of loss? What I'd like you to do now is click up at the T at the top of the page, the text tool, and click anywhere on your screen, and you can type in an example of loss. Once you type in your example of loss, you can click off of that text box, and it should post it for everyone to see. So please do that now. All right, we're getting a couple answers coming in. Please don't be shy. So far we have unused inventory, overtime, wasted material, time in general, no planning, unavailable parts. Absolutely. All of these are great examples. Machine downtime, if the machine's broken down and not doing what we want it to. Overtime, when we're paying our employees a premium to do the work that they should have been doing on a fixed time, or 40-hour weeks. Often overtime results because of no planning, where we don't have a plan for the day, and thereby we're living in a reactive mode, and we're running around like firemen, firefighters trying to address equipment. Human resource utilization, absolutely. You know, do we have 20 mechanics and no planners, or 19 mechanics and one planner? We can get a lot more done. Great. WIP, absolutely. Work in process, inventory time, all good examples. All right, so the way we define for this discussion organizational sin is unrealized potential. And a simple equation for that is taking where we could be, this theoretical ideal of where we could be, and subtracting from that where we are. Or if you think about it, some define target state versus our current state. And these losses, this waste can be at any level of the organization, down at the factory floor or up in the executive suite. So we'd like to take a poll now. How well defined is your organization's loss elimination program? So you see the choices off to the right, A, B, C, D. Please select one. Anywhere from we don't have a loss elimination program, our program is informal, our program is somewhat defined, or very defined. And we'll give all the participants a few minutes to select their answer, and then for Sherry to tally it for us.
And those results should be coming up in just a couple of seconds, Josh.
All right, thank you, Sherry. Oftentimes, we walk in and we do an assessment just to benchmark where they are, And oftentimes upper management will think that the loss elimination program is in place, that we have reliability engineers doing root cause analysis on troubled equipment or on lost revenue, lost dollars. But there's no formal program established, no trigger set in place, no teams developed, no action plans developed. So we have quite a bit of no answer, but we don't have one, 25%. And you can see the results break down in a Pareto chart, bar chart style, off to the right there. Informal 18%, somewhat defined, and very defined. One person out of 28 said we have a very defined program, and then that's great. All right, so I'm a Six Sigma black belt, and I've been trained for well over 10 years now, and when I go into an organization, I use the DMAIC process, the Six Sigma process, to evaluate any problem. Anytime there's an issue that needs to be addressed, the Six Sigma DMAIC process is, in my mind, the first tool in my toolbox is where I go to. And those steps, for those who are familiar, is first you define the problem. Then you begin to figure out how you're going to measure the problem. Oftentimes that also happens in the define stage. Then you analyze the data you've collected. You put forth action plans. You improve the issue. You perform a root cause analysis, and you set those actions in motion. And then you apply control strategies to make sure you actually have the results that you're looking for. And we're going to go through each one of those in a little bit more detail. First, define the D in the DMAIC process. We need to be aware and identify what the problem is. What is it that we're trying to fix? Are we going after the big fish? And for this, we need to understand our benchmarks and goals. And a great example is the Ted Williams story. When is 40% not a good number, but actually a great number? Ted Williams, I'm sure many of you sports fans, baseball fans are familiar, is the only player to ever end a season above a 400 batting average. You know what that means is 40% of the time he went into the batter's box, he actually got a hit. So most organizations, most professionals, most jobs, 40% is not a good number. But it's important to have that baseline, that benchmark, to understand where you are in comparison not only to what some kind of average is, but also what the best in class is. So if we're playing baseball, best in class is 40% batting average. Now, the measure piece of the DMAIC is getting the data collection. Whether that be a baseline measurement and a metric in terms of OEE that we'll talk more about in the future, or getting data from other sources. But now that we've defined the problem, I want to increase the mean time between failure for this pump, or I want to decrease my energy cost by 10%. We need to understand where we sit currently in order to know if the improvements we make actually have an impact. And what do we need data for that? One of the hardest and most challenging things is to gather appropriate data. And part of the define and measure process, it's important that we understand where the data is going to come from, whether it be our EAM or CMMS system, whether it be a manual input from an operator or some loss elimination program. But what we need to understand is that garbage in, garbage out. And our picture in the bottom left is an empty bookcase, and we can't make any analysis with no data. But worse than that is assuming that we have good data and drawing conclusions from it, and in fact, it's bad data. One more comment on data, and that garbage in is garbage out, and that we ideally would capture our data electronically. If we have foreman operators turning in reliability data or uptime data to their foreman at the end of the shift, how do we know that data is reliable? How do we know it's done the same way every time across multiple shifts with multiple personnel? If we have a program set up that forces us to document the data capture electronically, whether it be downtime numbers or production rate numbers or quality numbers, then that not only does that data have a higher potential to be reliable, it is also there for us historically. Now, the next part of the DMAIC process is analyze. Now we've defined our problem, we have the data to measure our successes and understand where we are today, our benchmark. We need to compare where we're at to that baseline and those goals, and we need to figure out what problem we want to tackle. If we define our problem to be decrease energy usage by 10%, it makes sense to do some analysis to organize our data such that we identify and analyze where our where our energy usage is going. And once we figure out what the largest usage of energy is, we can then determine what action plans, if any, we want to do to address those issues. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with Pareto charts. The Pareto principle is named after an Italian economist and philosopher, that 80% of our effects come from 20% of our causes. Now here in this example, this is a first-level Pareto chart. If we're measuring downtime or OEE in general, we have rate loss account for almost 18%, unscheduled downtime for almost 8%, scheduled downtime for just over 1%. So if I'm trying to improve my OEE, which we'll talk about in more detail in the coming slides, it makes the most sense for me to go after that first, highest, biggest bad actor first, that 18% of rate loss. And in order to do that, I need to understand what equipment is contributing to amount to my 18%. And this here, if we say this is our first level Pareto, we can break that down to a second level Pareto to go into more detail. Here in this example is pounds lost for quality issues, and raw materials and utilities accounted for the second largest portion of that. And if we break that down further, we see that CO and TDA are the two biggest hitters. So if we want to go figure out what's going on, TDA is where we would like to start. Okay, now maybe some of you were asking on the first level Pareto chart why planned rate change, even though that accounts for potentially 80-90% of our losses, why we won't go after that one first. And with this example, planned rate change was part of the business case, part of the production planning, and that was not able to be addressed. So we focused on the equipment issues, and we went after the things that were able to be addressed. So now we move to the improved piece in our DMAIC process. And now that we have our TDA that we know we want to go after, we need to address root causes and eliminate bad actors. And to do that, we need to understand the TDA process and perform a root cause analysis. That's when we enlist our reliability engineers to form a root cause analysis team and to determine where that TDA usage is coming from, how much of it is acceptable based on a benchmark or a target, and how much is unacceptable, and how much can be improved. Finally, we want to use our control piece and make sure that we have accountability to our process. Once in the improved piece, we implement action plans to address the losses and the usage of TDA. Now in the control piece of the DMAIC process, we're evaluating whether or not the actions that we put in place are allowing us to achieve our desired results. All right, time for another poll. Does your organization measure OEE, overall equipment effectiveness? And again, very similar to the last poll, never, not at all, on one critical line, on several lines, across our facility or across our organization. And I'll give you guys a couple minutes to answer those polls as well. Please do so now. Okay, so the poll has ended, and we'll just allow Sherry a little bit of time to crunch those numbers. So never, not at all, 59%. So again, the first step in measuring OEE is to figuring where our data is going to come from, just like any other process. And what is OEE? It's a metric, key performance indicator, to measure control and improve manufacturing capacity. It's a ratio of plant productive time to plant production time. And it can be assessed on a machine, on a line, a product line, an entire business unit, etc. How is OEE calculated? OEE in and of itself could be a topic of a future webinar, so we'll break down the formula here, at least at a high level. It's made up of 3 different components: availability, performance, efficiency, or rate, and quality, and all of those are defined therein. Availability is uptime divided by total time minus idle time, whereby uptime is total available time minus idle time, minus the sum of idle time and downtime. Total downtime is scheduled and unscheduled time. Performance efficiency or rate is your actual production rate divided by your best demonstrated or nameplate rate. If you have a machine that's supposed to make 1,000 widgets in an hour and we've only made 900, our rate is 900 divided by 1,000 or 90%. And quality is good units divided, or first pass units divided by total units produced. So we're taking out our rework there. A sample calculation. If we assume our availability to be 70%, our performance efficiency or rate to be 90%, and our quality to be 100%, our baseline OEE is 63%. And you get that by multiplying those 3 numbers across. But again, if we think of the Ted Williams story, how do we know if 63% is acceptable? Is it world-class? If historically we're in the 40% range, then 63% is fantastic. But if we're comparing ourselves to world-class numbers, 63% is nowhere near a world-class number of 85%. Now, again, it's important when we're defining this loss. Just measuring our OEE does nothing to improve performance. We can give a baseline and assume it's 63%, but unless we determine where the losses are coming from, what factors contribute to my loss of 37% from ideal, and be able to break those down in a Pareto chart, develop action plans, and go over them, we're not going anywhere. So the idea is, in order to do this, we're eventually going to want to put action plans in place and ask our boss or their boss for money in order to implement these action plans. So we need to understand what a 1% gain in OEE is worth in terms of dollars. We can do it in terms of quality, in terms of unit produced, in terms of machine uptime, but if we can get that and those numbers and put it in terms of dollars, we can speak the language that the accountants like to hear. Another poll. Does your organization develop action plans aimed to eliminate bad actors? Once we define that we have an OEE of 63%, that's fantastic. That's our baseline. What are we doing to improve our 63%? Is it possible to improve our 63%? You see that poll in the bottom right part of your screen? Please answer that now. All right, our poll has ended, and we're waiting for Sherry to tabulate our results for us. So sometimes 50%, always 4%. You guys can see the numbers there. And once again, our define, measure, analyze part allows us to figure out where our OEE is, but until we're moving through the analyze, improve, control piece of DMAIC to figure out, to develop an action plan and put something in place and make sure the results are as we want them to be, no gain is achieved. So let's spend a couple slides talking about bad actors. So for any OEE less than ideal, which OEE will never be ideal. So with our example of 63%, we want to list and prioritize our notable contributors through Pareto charts. First, second, third level Pareto charts allows us and our reliability engineers to identify where to focus their effort for a root cause analysis. Based upon that root cause analysis, we develop action plans. Based upon those action plans, maybe we want to increase our mean time between failure of a pump from 1 year to 2 years, and we can do that. Our action plan is to change our type of pump or change our material of construction. We want to understand and estimate where our gain is, estimate our loss reduction, and then calculate the ROI based upon that calculation, based upon that estimate. If we assume moving to the new pump is going to cost $50,000, but it allows us to produce 10,000 more widgets a year, and that's worth $400,000 a year, then you have a good business case. Once you develop your business case and calculate your ROI, you can move that through the proper channels to get the project sign-off and approval, and you can actually put in place your action plan. Once the action plan is complete, you can hold everyone accountable to the results of that plan, and you will achieve your results. Okay, so does your organization evaluate the effectiveness of action plans? So just having an action plan is fantastic, but we're not done until we put the project in place and then spend 1 month, 6 months, 1 year, whatever was defined in the D part of our DMAIC process, in order to identify and evaluate the success of our project. So are we following through as an organization in the control piece of the DMAIC process? So please answer that poll question now. So our poll has ended, and we'll have Sherry tabulate those results for us. So as you can see, the poll before, we had the majority sometimes, 54% actually have action plans, but rarely do we follow through and ensure that our action plans have created the value and eliminated the loss that we put them in place to do. So it's much better to do 2 things through to completion and make sure you get the results that you want than to try to tackle 10 projects at once and have the majority of which be unsuccessful. A great way to do that is through an action log. You can use Microsoft Project to define your plans. There's many tools out there. This is an example of a very simple action log. You see there the different columns: date, issue, priority, what is the action required, SPA is the person accountable, and a target date and whether or not it's completed. And whoever's a project manager of this loss elimination program can maintain these action logs to make sure we reach our completion dates. This here is a very simple action log. It was created in Excel. There's software out there that's available where you can have email updates, and you can do everything from buy the Cadillac or buy the Pinto. The important part is to make sure you follow through and you get the completed dates checked off. So in summary, how do we close the gap? How do we eliminate our losses and realize our potential? We determine our theoretical, whether that be a 100% OEE. We determine our baseline, our current state, where we are now. We develop targets for ourselves, and we work to close that gap by Pareto charting, developing action plans, and performing root cause analysis. And we can't be afraid to go after sacred cows just because something's untouchable. And in order to do that, the best way I've seen to go after things that are untouchable and sacred is to get multi-departmental support and to get high executive sponsorship. Once we've achieved that, we can develop our action plans, put them in place, use our control piece of the DMAIC process in order to make sure that we achieve our targets. And once we achieve our targets, we need to keep on moving and ensure that we raise our targets after that and set realistic stretch goals. And don't be afraid to start small, whether it be in a pilot area or on one machine, but go after something that's visible and that will have an impact to your bottom line in terms of dollars.
Thank you so much, Josh. That was great. We do have time for some questions now. If you do have questions, you can use the chat function in the bottom right corner of your screen to type in your questions. And just be sure to select all participants in the drop-down so everyone can view your questions. So while we've got some questions coming in, we'll let Josh get to those. I'll read one of them out now. We've got, this one's for you, Josh. Isn't a good OEE practice to use it as before and after on the same unit? Example, line A and not line A versus line B.
So I believe you guys can see the question there, and absolutely, David. So in your discussion, evaluating a before and after, you perform OEE to determine an OEE analysis to determine if on line A, if I'm at 50% today, I do these 4 actions, but in order to produce either increase our quality, increase our rate, or increase our availability, and measure our OEE after that. And what I would suggest is to not just measure it at one point in time, but to continue after the action is implemented, to continue to measure your performance over time. So you can have a rolling week OEE, a rolling month, a rolling year to date, a rolling quarter, all those things, so you can see how your OEE is trending over time and put that in terms of dollars. It is also possible to measure OEE from line A to line B, but the danger there, as David alluded to, is that you end up not comparing apples to apples. So awareness and education is an important part if we're comparing production line A, which is a continuous production line, to production line B, which is a batch production line. Obviously, we're going to have more downtime due to changeover losses and things like that, so it's not a good practice to measure from line A to line B. Good question. Any other questions out there?
Looks like that's it for the questions. So we'll go ahead and take you guys through some of the events that we have upcoming. We've got a maintenance planning and scheduling class coming up next month in June, the 13th through the 17th here in Charleston. After that, our next class won't be until August. So if you guys are looking to take a maintenance planning and scheduling class, we do have the one coming up in a couple of weeks if you're looking to get into something fairly soon. We also have our 4-part Reliability Excellence for Managers course. The last new session of the year is going to be starting in August, so if that's something you guys want to start taking now, I would recommend going ahead and getting signed up for the August class, because that is a 4-part course that you'll take over the duration of about 8 months. And finally, we do have Ron Moore, who's going to be coming here. He is well-renowned in the reliability circuit, and he is going to be doing a workshop on reliability and operational excellence here in September. And then if you guys can tune in next month, we're going to have a webinar all about communication. It's called I Talk, You Listen, Not Anymore. This is going to be about some tips on driving results by effective communication. So this is going to be on Thursday, July the 7th, from 1 to 1:30, and you can check out our next edition of the Impact newsletter. That's going to be coming out on June 14th. And if you don't currently subscribe to our e-newsletter, just send us an email at education@lce.com, and we'll make sure we put you on that email list. If there are any other questions for Josh or anyone here at Lifecycle, just feel free to email those to education@lce.com, and we'll make sure that we address those. Thank you all for joining us today, and hope you have a great afternoon.